Hi guys, this is Mistletoe Navi. Today I'd like to delve a little into my history with the 5th generation of Pokemon games. While I'll primarily be talking about the first entries, a lot of my praises will apply to the sequels as well. This video will be about how those games were, essentially, the future. By the future, I mean that these games, to me, felt very futuristic and way ahead of their time, like they were the next step in video games, unlike anything we'd ever seen before it. In case it wasn't obvious, I'm going to be gassing these games up, but not just for its gameplay loop, but for a lot of things. I hope that I can give you a different perspective or remind you of days gone by. With the preamble finished, please join me, and let's go visit the world of Pokemon. Let's go back in time to 2010, where Pokemon Black and White had not yet been released in Japan, but the hype for them was real nonetheless. I remember watching the first trailer and being dumbfounded that something like this could even exist, especially on a DS. Look at the Versus screen, talking with someone to their face. A huge city. A roller coaster. Those must be the new starters. The camera moves around in battle. Did that Pokemon just transform after being hit? You can connect your games to the internet. The animations are so cool. As a young girl, I was clamoring for as much information as I could get about these games. Every single day, I'd go online with my terrible internet and scrounge up any information I could, checking all of the fan sites, most often going to PokeBeach. I specifically remember a post there 2 days before the games were out in Japan with all of the Pokemon sprites, which were very shortly after all replaced with a picture of Ditto. I have a family friend from Japan who I've known since I was little, and I vividly remember asking my mother to send her mother an email and ask whether she was going to pick Tsutaja, Pokabu, or Mijimaru, the Japanese names of the starter Pokemon, as they didn't have English names yet. Eventually, after a long time of being the most excited I've ever been for a video game in my life, even to this day, Pokemon Black and White released. And did they live up to the hype? Absolutely. Little 12-year-old Navi booted up Pokemon Black for the first time and was greeted with one of the coolest intros ever. Hope. Dream. Discovery. Adventure awaits for you and your Pokemon. So, let's dive right in. The very first thing we do is pick our starter. Snivy, Tepig, or Oshawott. I honestly liked all of them, but I usually gravitated towards water, and Oshawott resonated with me a little bit more than the others. I delved into my first battle, and despite having seen all of the trailers and pre-release footage, I was still blown away by it. The HUD was so sleek, and the menu sounds were so cool. I loved how much the camera moved during battle, and the Pokemon were fully animated now too. Everything was so snappy and responsive as well, a far cry from the slower pace of Generation 4. And when the battle ended, the room was a mess. They really thought of everything, huh? When I made it to the second town, Accumula Town, like most people, I thought that the music was a nice little tune. Then I did some exploring and found a man on the drums and a woman on the piano. I talked to them, and the music changed. There was dynamic music. This blew my mind, of course. After the obligatory Pokemon Center tutorial, we meet up with what I knew right away would be the bad guys. As the evil-looking guy was giving his speech, the crowd reacts with little bubbles. It really didn't feel like I was playing a video game. It felt like I was there. After Accumula Town is the first gate. And I find gates in Pokémon Black and White to be the perfection of rest spots in video games. While I appreciate games like Xenoblade 3 for having rest spots that have their own gameplay features, the gates in these games just nail the vibe. The calming music, the signboard with the text and images, the friendly assistant, it's just such a beautiful way of giving you a chance to catch your breath. It never fails to help me relax, even just for a little bit. Already, this game had wowed me in several ways, and will continue to do so with aspects both major and minor. You do a little pose when you get an item, just like in Zelda. There's an awesome animation when you get a gym badge. There's shaking grass with different encounters. There's a cool animation for the sea you're starting up too. Evolution dematerializes and rematerializes the Pokemon. Double battles in the wild. Sleeping Pokemon close their eyes. The gym leaders have a special theme when they're on their last Pokemon. There were so many little things that were just outstanding to me. I'd also like to very briefly touch on the camera because I love how they use perspective to really make this world feel like so much more than just a grid. An experience that was more particular to people like me who live in the middle of nowhere was the sheer amazement of Sky Arrow Bridge and Castelia City. Imagine being a kid who lived in the middle of Nowheresville surrounded by small towns, only getting glimpses of the big city via television. In my case, living in Vermont, New York City felt so close yet so far. When I exited Pinwheel Forest, I was greeted with what would become one of my favorite views in video games. The bridge I knew I was going to cross, and in the distance, this city. Finally, the big city I'd seen little bits of in trailers and screenshots, it was in view, just across that bridge. Crossing the bridge in and of itself was really cool too. The camera was super dynamic, and you could hear the sounds of the wind and of cars and boats going by. I said earlier that the game really made me feel like I was there, but the sound design here really hammered that feeling in. Already feeling like I was in the game, it just made entering Castelia City all the more magical. At last, I was going to see what, to me, was just as good as being in the real-life city. It really had everything. The buildings were as tall as the eye could see. There were piers with boats coming and going. A cafe. Big screen advertisements. Busy streets where you'd get glimpses of what people were saying as you walked by them. Street performers in a big fountain. Shady people in alleyways. Offices. A food stand. Parties with people of different cultures. An art museum. There's just so much here. A lot of these may seem relatively uninteresting to someone already accustomed to those things. But for someone like me, it was a wonderful experience. And in the next town, Nimbasa, there's a gigantic Ferris wheel. And it's not just for show, you can actually ride it. They have Pokemon musicals there too, which weren't really my cup of tea, but it's cool that they're there, a fun little diversion. On either sides of Nimbasa are 2 bridges. There's 5 total in Unova, and they're all unique in their own ways. There's a drawbridge, a bridge that carries trains, a bridge with an entire village on it, and also Marvelous Bridge, which is less interesting, but still cool. By the way, in the playthrough I did to get footage of this game, outside of Nimbasa City, I had this happen. You gotta be kidding me! What? No! There's no way! A major mechanic I haven't mentioned yet is seasons. Every month of real time, the in-game season changes. This affects the route music, times of sunrise and sunset, certain locations' accessibility, the appearance of Deerling and Sawsbuck, wild encounters, and weather. While it may not match the real-life seasons, it definitely goes a long way to make the world feel more alive with how things keep changing. Every mainline Pokemon entry comes with multiple versions, and with it, version differences. While in past games, the extent of version differences has just been access to certain Pokemon, they take it up a notch here. Opelucid is old and traditional in white, or technological and futuristic in black, and it has a different gym leader for each version. Black City, exclusive to black, focuses on items and trainers, while White Forest, exclusive to white, focuses on catching wild Pokemon from other regions. White has triple battles and black has rotation battles, both being new directions for battling. The first time I saw the new battle styles in pre-release footage, I was gobsmacked. 6 Pokemon fighting at once. That wouldn't have even been able to fit on the screen in the older games. I haven't really talked about the online connectivity yet because there wasn't a huge amount I could do with it with how bad my internet was. I did finally get Wi-Fi like a year before the games came out here, but it still wasn't very fast. That being said, it was still an integral part of the experience for me. Now, some of this is definitely applicable to Generation 4 games, such as battling and trading. However, Wi-Fi wasn't yet in just about every common household at that point. One of my team members was traded, actually. I wanted to use a Braviary, but I had a black version, so I traded with an online friend. So anyway, what was so special about the online connectivity in Generation 5? The Pokémon Global Link. You could tuck one of your Pokémon into bed to catch some Z's, and they'd go to the dream world that you could check in on your browser. There are mini-games, you could get items, farm berries, and even find wild Pokémon to send to the Entralink. Oh right, the Entralink. The Entralink was really interesting, and I barely got to use it. The Entralink let you visit other players' own worlds. That's right, you could walk around and talk to players in their own games, or vice versa. And there were missions you could take on with them too. You could also give each other pass powers, which would do things like raise or lower encounter rates, give you discounts, or raise EXP or money gained, and so on and so forth. And of course, there was the Entree Forest, where you could catch the Pokemon that you met in the dream world. After collecting all 8 gym badges, it's time to challenge the Pokemon League. The Elite Four can be challenged in any order. Pretty small, but neat deviation from the previous games. After overcoming each of them, it's time to face Alder, the champion of the Unova League. However, entering the Champions Room, we find that Alder had just been defeated by N, the leader of this game's evil team. Said team, Team Plasma, who'd been out of her hair for a little bit, shows their ugly face yet again, as their castle rises from the ground, surrounding the entire Pokemon League. Giant stairways pierce their way into the Champions Room, and N leaves, beckoning us to follow him and let our beliefs clash in a fateful duel. This was completely unprecedented. Never before in the series had your venture into the League been interrupted like this. Obviously, Cyrus's plans were massive in scale, but he wasn't as impactful as this. We had to go out of our way to stop him, but we've always seeked out the bad guys in the previous games. This time, they came to us, and threw a huge castle-shaped wrench in our plans. We had to put aside our goals to defeat N. Upon reaching the throne room, N's legendary dragon bursts in! But before we can begin the battle, the stone we'd been holding onto for a while begins to react. And from it forms another legendary dragon. This one, he wants to be our friend. And as such, it challenges us. We catch it, and finally, we duel with N. After triumphing in a clash of 2 virtues, and N is defeated, it's not over? N was merely a puppet for Getsus, the real mastermind, this entire time. Well, it's not terribly surprising that Getsus was the mastermind. The fact that there were layers to this whole scheme and a whole emotion-packed plot. It's why Black and White are remembered as some of the greatest. After a back-to-back-to-back challenge, the dragon, N, and Getsus, it's finished. With Getsus defeated, N changes his course, bids you farewell, and sets off to find his own purpose. Pokémon Black and White were a huge step forward for the series. They were unlike any of the previous games. In fact, I remember telling a classmate that these would be the very last Pokémon games, as if there was no way they could even be topped. They're special to me and many others for a lot of reasons, and I hope I could illustrate a little bit of why for you today, and maybe even give you an itch to replay them. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. I sincerely appreciate it. You said you have a dream. That dream, make it come true.